Yep, I'll be speaking today about traditional versus non-traditional color terms applied to sapphire. The trend, and we're looking at basically trend versus passion. So trend is going to be the peach color and teal, and the passionate colors are going to be purpuraja and blue. Those two colors specifically have a long history. So B will denote blue, BV, bluish violet, and then on the inverse, GB, greenish blue, and then bluish green. And then the same would be applied to orangish red and reddish orange, which would be purpuraja versus peach. I would really recommend or advise that you ask questions, because it can, I'm 99% sure I would have the answers for you, but the goal is to basically answer your questions so you can walk away with as much knowledge as you can from this session. So a couple of things I'd like to discuss: what's driving the teal color sapphire market? When did this trend begin? How long will it last? Pricing volatility, understanding the color, the GIA color wheel. Is there a pricing difference between heated and unheated? And how does origin impact color? So to get started, let's have a look at the GIA color wheel. So when I'm referencing teal, green, bluish green, or greenish blue, it's going to be in the spectrum from right here, greenish blue, all the way to strongly yellowish green. It's pretty broad. And then one other type of stone that would fall into this category is also bicolor, where it's going to be bicolor between yellow and green. So this would be an example of true teal. It's near 50-50 blue and green. This color is definitely consumer driven, and most of the consumer driven products are actually starting in jewelry is started by the designer. The designer will design a piece which is I would say attractive to a consumer, and through that process, consumer driven, designer driven, it goes back to the source, and the source countries will start not really searching it, it's not really searching for it, but they will begin collecting more. Typically, most corundums in source country, most corundum is going to be collected, and so in a lot of cases held, but that also will push the pricing side of that specific color. Where, for example, for the time being, I'll bring up this stone in particular is one that I did own. It's 4.01 carat, and it's a round, perfect teal. And in 2015, you're looking at maybe 125 per carat. Right now, it's going to go for over 1,000. So that's the how drastically the prices have changed. Non-traditional bridal fits a different market sector. The millennial generation is more budget conscious in regards to luxury goods and interest. They're constantly looking at value, which is quality times price, sustainability, ethics, transparency, and a transparent supply chain. I think when we get into the subject matter of sustainability, ethics, and transparency, my best advice to you all is to be very cautious, because it's being used as a buzzword primarily. I think what I've been hearing, I'll be doing another lecture in Dallas coming up, but with the government panel, but they're using the designers, or the retailers tend to be using this in a basically in a manner to drive more sales, not necessarily vetting the suppliers or the process to make sure that it truly is sustainable, ethical, and transparent. So this is what I would categorize as a bicolor. As you can see in the center, we see a yellowish green hue, and on either end, teal to green. We're finding that for most of the bicolors that I've been finding in Sri Lanka, through the mines that I work with, generally in smaller sizes, 0.5 carat to 1.5 carats. But in Madagascar, I would say we're finding larger sizes, upwards of 5, 6, and 7 carats. But Sri Lanka in particular, I'm seeing bicolors are smaller. Primary origin for this color is going to be Madagascar, Sri Lanka, Montana, and Australia. As most of you might know, Australian sapphires are mined at a metamorphic level. That's typically going to be relatively deep. I would say under or more than 150 feet in depth, maybe closer to 200. Whereas Sri Lanka and Montana, generally, most of the mining is happening from surface level down to about 100 and 120 maximum. Madagascar, Madagascar is a work in progress. I would say their mining practice is not very environmentally friendly, but there is plenty of material available, starting at as shallow as 5 feet. And again, a lot of the green, teal, and bicolor, yellowish green bicolor, the finest material that I've seen in the last 5 years is coming from Madagascar. Color description by origin. One thing that we do that I would say, we're finding the finer color of green and teal from Madagascar. That means greater saturation, depth of color, and a nice medium hue. The Sri Lankan material tends to have this yellowish, low yellowish hue to it, or sometimes it would have a more earthy tone. And those could be two discrepancies to even identify origin. The other origin factor with sapphire that I've found for quick ID is small crystal inclusions. Typically in the Madagascar material, it's going to be thousands and thousands of tiny crystals. And when you see that under 10x, it's a quick identifying factor. So I just want to give you guys a quick pricing example of how prices changed. This graph displays from 2014 to 19, but if you guys are keeping notes, I can give you the 20 and 21 update. So as you can see here, going back to 2014, we're looking at roughly 185 per carat, and we're looking at an average size of 1.5 carats, $185 per carat. And then by 15, we're hitting 200, 16, 280, 17, 300, 18, 365, 19, you're looking at 390. So right now, I was speaking to Melanie before we started, and I've seen an 80% increase in price in this color range this year, just from January 1st to the end of July. So that's one, speaks for the popularity of the color. Again, we're going back to designer driven and consumer driven. But also it's the reason that it might go against the traditional blue is because of the fluctuation, or not the fluctuation, but the drastic increase in price of blue sapphires. So if we take that 4 carat round that we saw in the third slide, something like that, which for a teal, 4 carat fine is 1,000 to let's say 1,150. For something similar in blue, fine color, you're looking at about 3,500 to 4,000. So drastic change in price, more than 3 times. So that is one of the primary reasons why designers are shifting to different colors, fancy colors, and it's attracting the consumer market. Sometimes in using the word greenwashing helps make it more attractive. And in the end, the product is moved, but you have to decide if that works. Between the buzzwords the pricing shifts, and how it's sourced, whether that's going to work you and your company. The predictions of colors are typically very cyclical, meaning up and down. They will come in and out of style. So if you look at any fashion, technically we're in the fashion industry. If you look at any fashion, let's take, for example, suits. What was in fashion in let's say the early 1900s, then you move on like 30 years, it came into fashion again, another 30, 40 years, back again. Expect the same with color and style. Green is very strong color. I predict based on demand and supply that this will continue for at least 2 to 3 years, and possibly even more. Right now, with where things stand globally, when we're looking at supply chain, right now mining is at under 10% globally, and in Sri Lanka, which I would say is a major mining locality, it's right around 7%. So that's also shifting the price upwards because there's less availability. So like I said, let's say 3 to 4 years for the time being, in 1 to 2 carat round, oval, emerald cut, and cushion. Fancy shapes tend to be niche. For example, right now, a very popular color is pear, popular shape is pear. And so again, that fits into your business model. If you're a dealer or a retailer, how many pear shapes do you want to sit on? I would say with fancy shapes such as pears or marquise, that could change within a matter of months. So again, very dependent on your business model and how quickly you were able to adapt to change. So before we move on, that's the end of my first section. Please go ahead. Are there any questions?
Okay, I have a question. Shihan, so primarily jacking up the prices, basically the supply chain is not moving. Number one, no mining. Number two, and shifting of the designers to the fancy color primarily because of the cost of the blue is crazy. And that is what driving the popularity of the fancy color.
Yeah, we're going to see color shifts really quickly.
Yeah.
Meaning a color is going to be in today, and it might be out literally within 2 or 3 months.
Right.
So the complexity behind this is primarily financial. So like I hit on, the consumers are driven by the designers. Right. But on the back end, we're looking at on a very surface level, back end issues are GDP to debt ratio, and one of the most I think it hurts me personally that I'm seeing this happen. But for example, Sri Lanka is in such heavy debt that they're unable to repay. They do not allow the transfer of funds leaving the country. They will only bring cash into the country, and nothing can go out. So that's one major issue. So there's really no trade that's occurring, and that impacts inflation. So inflation is one factor. Trade GDP to debt ratio is another factor. Supply chain is a factor. This is going to eventually evolve into numerous things, especially when we're looking at the political situation globally.
Yeah.
And so those things are almost all equal. I would say the primary that's driving it, the prices right now, and the color is going to be designer / consumer. But those other factors that I just stated, I would say are all equally important.
Well, so in other words, it is going to take at least quite a few years before the prices could level for, as far as the going back to the original, the blues. I mean, blues, they are untouchable at the moment.
They are. And so for, since the pandemic started 18 months ago, we saw a major uptick in if you're on the wholesale side selling single stones versus production, there was a major uptick in wholesale because consumers needed to find a place to spend.
Mhm.
They're not able to travel. And I would say luxury goods, whether it's wine or jewelry, it kind of falls into the same categories as vacationing because it's additional income that you don't 100% need to survive. So because everyone was kind of stuck at home, this was an easy outlet for them to just go shopping and find things online. So and also on the online part, um, a lot of smaller stores, smaller online stores who were selling through outlets like IG, Instagram, they were doing extremely well because they were already positioned for this position. So yeah, these are major directional changes that I'm seeing. I would say just to hit on the answer about the direction and how long it's going to take. The price usually with gemstones, once they go up, they rarely
Yeah,
go down
that is so
unless
true.
there's a major war in a gemstone producing country.
Yeah.
So I can always speak back to Sri Lanka because I was flying in and out of Sri Lanka when it was a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
And the prices were either stable or low because of that. So we might potentially see that with Afghani material,
Right.
and I hope that you all make a good decision in how you would want to make those purchases because going back to Afghanistan, it does play a major with the country being overrun by the Taliban now. It's going to play a major influence in where the funding goes. That's why transparency is becoming more and more important.
Yeah.
A couple of questions from the chat.
Yes.
Are these stones generally heated?
I would say right now 30% unheated with green, teal, 30%, about 70% heated. And that would be all origins. So Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Australia. Australian sapphire has to be heated because we use the blowpipe method, which reduces the color to bring out more vibrancy to the stone. So I would say nearly 100% of all Australian sapphires have to be heated.
And the other question was concerning price. Cut blue sapphire. Members have seen it selling for as much as 50K per carat.
With blue sapphire?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll move on to that section. It's something that we're going to be getting into here very shortly, but 50K per carat, Charles, is if it's a Kashmiri material, it's upwards of 200,000 per carat. So yeah, I think there was a Kashmir that hammered at Christie's earlier this year for I think 250 per carat.
Go on to the next section.
Pretty nice stone. But yeah, the blues are, the upward trajectory is so sharp, and the low amount of supply that's available to the market, it's pushing consumers and designers to move towards fancy colors, definitely. And even the rate at which teal has moved, it's gonna be something else. It might end up being yellow, or it might end up being orange. Just colors that are going to be more affordable until those hit higher prices as well. So moving on to blue sapphires, here's some questions. So we kind of hit on this, and it's going to overlap current supply and demand, contrary to teal, demand and supply. I'll talk very briefly about Gouda. I mean, it's one of my areas of expertise. Some of you may know, some may not know. Some historical pricing over 14 years, primary origin, heated versus unheated availability, trade terms versus numerical grading, pricing trend, time versus price heated, pricing trend, time versus price unheated. Again, ask as many questions as you like. Blue is much narrower tolerance. So everything from violetish blue, meaning blue dominant, violetish secondary, or blue blue primary, or very slightish greenish blue. Again, as long as the color description ends with blue, that is the primary color. That's what we're going to be speaking on here. So it's basically 3 grades within the GIA color wheel. So I'll get into the branding versus numerical grading system. This would be considered an open royal blue, which is a trade term. One thing that I have noticed over my 15 years in quantifying, and I have a reference sample, which I also supplied to the major laboratories globally, is that we want to keep numerical grading in place. So when we look at numerical grading, grading a sapphire, on a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale versus calling it royal blue or peacock blue or let's say cashmere. Those tend to be terms, or cornflower. Those tend to be a little bit arbitrary because the laboratory themselves will grade them differently. In my opinion, there are only 3 top-tier labs in the world. Without going into explaining which ones those are, you do want to look at, are the laboratories using trade terms? Are they using numerical grading system to describe the color? Or are they just, if they use a trade or branding term, it can be a little bit arbitrary because that's 100% based on the person who's doing the evaluation. And in the end, that impacts price. I would say at this point, we want to stick to one grading method that everyone understands, which is numbers. So that's kind of my stance on it. And I would say the 3 top-tier laboratories have a similar stance, and I hope you guys understand. Please ask questions on this because it does get a little bit complex. Next, varieties of Gouda. Gouda is the whitish material that's mined, and it comes out of the ground, like I said, white. Sometimes it can have a little bit more silk, which is titanium, and then during the heating process, essentially this silk is turning blue. It dissolves, which is still, I hope all of you probably know that that is still considered a natural sapphire because we're not altering the structure of the mineral. It stays the same. We're just burning off excess silk and developing the color in just a thermal enhancement. And the only other factor that would be considered is time. So when we're evaluating these the rough, and when we're looking at the amount of silk, then we're also determining temperature and time. And so I don't know if you guys are all familiar with this, but the heating method is actually 4-phase. One is low temperature, which I mentioned with the metamorphic sapphires that are green sapphires that are mined in Australia. Low temperature, usually under about 900 degrees. Then we go to a 2-phase heating method, which does short-term high temperature. So between 4 and 7 hours, starting at 1550 to 1950 centigrade. And then the variability in time is basically going to come down to the burner, the person who's running the heater. And then the final method is called electric heat. And nowadays, I'd say almost 70% of all sapphires, blue, will go through an electric heating method, which is just longer. I've had, which kind of, it's bad if you're the owner of the rough, because electric heating can take up to 6, sometimes 9 months, because it's just a consistent temperature over 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And again, we're evaluating the internal inclusions, determining size, quality, and the amount of available silk. And again, they're broken down into these varieties that I've listed here at the top. So Otu's primary characteristic is a small color concentration. When it's heated, that color concentration expands. And sometimes when it's cut and polished, if any of you have seen a concentration of color at the keelet, and then when it's cut, it disperses the color. If you immerse the stone in water, you can definitely see that because water slows down the speed of light, you can definitely see that the color is concentrated at one spot. Usually a skilled cutter can focus the color in one area and have it distribute nicely. Dum is probably the easiest color rough or variety of Gouda to identify because it comes out of the ground blue. And then because of the evenness of the silk, the color will typically just evenly distribute through the rough. Sometimes it's preformed or sometimes it can be just heated. The tricky ones are going to be silky and milky and diesel because like honestly on the rough end it's like winning the lottery, and this is common in back end source countries where you can buy a silky Gouda 5 carats for maybe $100 and you heat it up and it's beautiful blue, and that just went from $5 up to maybe $6,000. So especially when we're talking about developing countries, that's a huge change. And yeah, so moving on. Primary origins for sapphires right now, Burma. We all most of you might know that there are restrictions with Burmese imports by the FTC because of the violence that's been going on there. So again, going back to how the supply chain gets interrupted, it's political, and it can be violent, financial. Those all play into where things are today, unfortunately. Burma, Sri Lanka, and Madagascar. So unfortunately, there's no good option right now because of the virus situation and the, like I said, the GDP to debt ratio of Sri Lanka, for example. Madagascar is an up and coming country, but does need infrastructure as far as mining goes. And that's a big role that I've been trying to play in that country itself, is building infrastructure to help the miners understand the steps or the procedures that need to be taken to pull material out of the ground instead of strip mining. So just going back to what the stone is, it's a blue sapphire. I believe it is from Sri Lanka. And you can see some of the unburnt silk. That's why it has that hazy look to it. Sri Lanka also does produce some of the finest replicas, let's say, of Kashmir that comes from the area called Elahera. And even the laboratories have a hard time identifying that. Same with Madagascar. I would say going back to 2018, there were a number of sapphires mined in Madagascar that were being sent out to top tier labs again, which were getting a Kashmir cert. Moving on, unheated versus heat. 99% of all sapphire, all blue sapphire is heated. 95% of all sapphire, that means pink, yellow, orange, green, 95% are heated. If you, like I said, if we go back to the comment I said earlier, where we're looking at 60 to 70% heated, that's only specific to green. But if we look at the entire sapphire market, 95% heated, 5% unheated, 1% unheated in blue, 99% heated in 1% unheated in blue, 99% is going to be heated. This was the Pantone Color of the Year. So supply and demand was, supply was unfortunately low for considering Pantone kind of sets the standard. But unfortunately, you know, through a difficult year last year, so many things shut down. A lot of the material that was hitting the market was already available, and I think the secondary market was doing pretty well for a little while. I've had a number of dealers come into the office, or actually estate dealers, you know, asking me to evaluate and see if I'm interested in buying because of the low output from source countries. Just threw this in there. This is a typical, if we were going to use a trade term, cornflower blue. And we can look at some pricing here. Going back to 2018, we are looking at time versus price for heated and unheated. And we're looking at a size of 2 to 3 carat average, royal blue to open blue. So unheated is the darker graph here. And going back to 2008, 850 per carat. And 2019, we're looking at 4,550, 4,500 per carat. I would say at 2021 July, we're probably looking at upwards of 6,500 per carat. So substantial jump. I would say between 19 to 21, at least 30% in these sizes. When we're looking at heated, looking at about 450 back in 2018 and jumping all the way up to 2,200. Again, 2 to 3 carat sizes. I would say we are looking at today, 2021, closer to 4,000, well, closer to 3,000 per carat for nice, fine quality blue that's heated. My predictions: blue sapphire is the most popular colored stone in the United States. A steady trajectory in price will continue for the foreseeable future. Silver and rust natural disasters are the only reasons I believe will cause volatility. Sri Lanka, being one of the largest producers of blue sapphire, has only mined 3% of its land. That's a good stat to keep in mind. Unheated blue sapphire in 3 to 7 carat sizes will see pricing increase of 20 to 25%. That should be probably more around 35 to 40% over year over year, specifically Burmese and Sri Lanka. Keep that number in mind. It's going to be important moving forward as we see more volatility with blue sapphire production and then shifting colors. Okay, and I'm ready to take more questions on blue.
When you say when you give the numerical grading, does that what is that based on? The 1, 2, 3, 4? Is that the GIA grading? Because that seems different.
Yeah. So GIA, the GIA standard, I would say is and should be the industry standard for laboratories. Unfortunately, some laboratories look at it as a opportunity to twist trade terms to benefit. So some laboratories are going to do millions and millions and millions of certs per year.
Mm-hmm.
That's their goal as a business, to pop out certs. Certain markets, without me actually stating, are so brand heavy, it's cultural. So if they can get a pigeon blood red on a certificate, it carries substantial weight for them. But the accuracy of the certificate is the issue. So I actually went to the extent of grading the laboratories. So I have top tier, first tier labs, like I said, 3. There are probably another 3 second tier, and so on and so forth. I would say down to a 4th tier lab. and anything beyond fourth tier is really worth even mentioning. So like how my business model in particular works is we have overlapping ethical, sustainable, transparency, and then you have wholesale. So a dealer who's wholesaling might be one of 15 people who touch the stone and add on, 20%. Versus on a fully transparent chain of custody, it's coming straight from the mine to the designer or the retailer's hand, but the cost to operate that way is absurdly high because we're constantly verifying that the product is what it is supposed to be, even when it changes hands between mining, cutting, heat treatment, laboratories, multiple laboratories, and then distribution.
When you say follow GIA and you're talking about numerical, that means like ORRO 55, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Not all laboratories follow the same protocol, and that's
right.
probably one of the biggest issues. So some laboratories will follow their own protocol, which is put in place to make the business more profitable. I'm not trying to be here or try to tell a business owner how they need to run their business, but I definitely am for, on the ethical side, standardization, and especially on the top tier laboratory, and that once that numerical grading is standardized across the board, because all graders, all laboratories understand the numbers. When we move into a trade term context, example, peacock, royal, cornflower, everyone's minute differences can make each person's eye view it differently. And that's what we're trying to eliminate. So then it turns into an issue of how many certificates do you want? Would you like 1 or 2? Or do you want to have to recertify every 5 years or every 3 years? I know a number of stones right now that need recertification just because the certification process is outdated, 20, 25 years, which is understandable. But if you're trying to broker a stone and it's been certified at one laboratory, which I would say is second tier, but it has the right branding as far as the color type, it's just not going to last. The cert will carry its weight for a year, maybe 2 years, but it would require recertification, I believe. Sri Lanka has the history behind it being a source country, similar to Thailand. Thailand is a major distributing point. Colombo is turning into probably a second distributing point at this time. But Sri Lankans, actually right now, I would say the Thais, the Sri Lankans, the Chinese, they just go and sit at the mine site, hoping to get first dibs and then make offers. And that's where if you're a source buyer, you need to know what you're buying. You need to know it. And that includes knowing the origin. Because if you're a source buyer, Sri Lankans or whoever, I'm not going to put it just on them, but they will try to pass it off as Sri Lankan material until you're able to prove differently. And so Ethiopian material, it has specific inclusions and definitely a lighter tone and lighter hue. Like the hue is identifiable, but definitely the tone is lighter, which obviously is going to impact the price.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that. It's the saturation that is a little bit weaker, not the hue. The hue is blue, but the saturation is weaker. For example, with their greens and their blues tend to be more pastel. So moving on to peach, it's blended mix of pink, a pinkish orange to orangish pink. For me in the field, I do like a quick evaluation, and I need to see 80% of one color and minimum of 20% of the other. So if it falls below those tolerances, 80-20, it's going to fall into a peach. If it falls above that, it's going to be a bud Paraja. Again, we're going to hit on what's driving the market, similar to teal, very similar. sample of peach and their color range. Real question, the harder alternative to morganite or alternative paparaja. So we're looking at hardness or lack of tone and saturation, like the paparaja. This color does pose a color stability issue. We'll go over that really quickly. And I'm happy to say the pricing is actually very, very stable. It does rival peach as far as a popular color, but it's much more stable than peach at this point. So going back to the color wheel, we're looking at, again, for peach, it's going to be a lighter tone, and weaker saturation. So looking at anything in this reddish orange all the way over to orangish yellow. So basically about a 6 color range. Tone scale usually with peaches is going to be medium light to very light. Saturation scale is going to be somewhere in the 2 to 3 range. And so here we're looking at this is a peach, but frequently considered or called a champagne color. Again, I'm referring back to the 20% of one color and 80% of the other. I'm referencing to the orange and pink specifically. So if there is, in my book, when I'm in the field, I'm looking to get as close to 50-50. Closer we are to 50-50, the higher the chance of paparaja. The difference, you're looking at basically, you know, a $400 stone or a $2,000 stone. That takes, it just takes practice. So it has, again, similar market to teal and green sapphire, alternative bridal. And again, it's more demand driven, of a demand driven color, and designer driven. Example of a peach sapphire with lower tone and saturation. Stability issues in peach. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but this overlaps with the yellow as well. So when we go back to the color wheel, I think, let me just go back. So the stability issue in this color, peach, will also be an issue with paparaja and yellow. So everything from, I would say, yellow right here to orangish, reddish orange, orangish red. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar, but at specific temperature points in light, and that could be, it's usually happening in daylight, the color loss. Yeah, there will be a loss of color, and it can go completely white. The reason for this is still a phenomenon, but there have been new tests that have been developed, specifically called the fade test. And the fade test will basically test the stone's limitations of with temperature and light. In my experience, we actually had we were at the Hong Kong show a number of years ago. We had, I think it was about a 7-carat yellow sapphire, and we just stuck it in the case in the morning, and by evening it had turned white. So that was like our lesson. And then we went back and talked to our guru in Sri Lanka about it. If it's caught within a reasonable amount of time, it is reversible, but the color will consistently be unstable. So the one, again, it can be reversed with UV light and temperature, and usually the temperature for reversal ends up being roughly 80 degrees and under a UV light. So, I mean, here's a funny story. I actually sold one of these. Unfortunately, this was probably right around 2014. Customer bought a yellow sapphire, and about 2 weeks later, they called me up and they just said, "Look, we were setting it," and she told me that she felt like the color changed under the temperature of her torch while she was setting it or mounting it. And I called her, I asked her, "So what happened?" And she just said, "Look, maybe the torch got a little too close. The temperature just basically turned white. And the customer is picking it up tomorrow." So I was trained by Mr. Dhanapala in Ratnapura, who's basically, I would say, one of the top 3 in the world in thermal enhancement. And I asked him what to do. And his answer was, "Tell her to put it in her mouth." And I was like, huh. And then after she said he told me 1 hour in her mouth and then overnight in under UV light, and the color came back. So it was caught in time, the adjustments were made, and it was still a product that was sold. She had to disclose that it was fading. But the point is, the mouth is because of temperature. And so when we think of rural Sri Lanka, yeah, that's the first thing they're going to say. Stick it in your mouth. It's 98 degrees. And then stick it in UV light to bring back the color. So this is the first occurrence for me. It was 2014. But that is going to be a permanent issue. I see more instability in color coming from Madagascar. But from a laboratory level and from a chemistry level, laboratories don't care what the origin is, because if it's happening in Madagascar, it really could have happened in Sri Lanka as well, or other countries. So that being said, that's kind of the state of the peach color and Padparaja and yellow with testing stability. Other problems origin related, like I mentioned, I'm seeing this. I am personally seeing this primarily coming out of Madagascar, but they are doing this same tests, and I'm sure that because of the theory of Pangea, where all the continents were connected millions and possibly billions of years ago, geologically, it has to be similar in all the countries within that region, at least. So yeah, it is definitely origin related as well. And so we're just looking at a couple more peaches here, falling in the peach category. Just to give you an idea of ketone saturation here, we're looking at a pinkish yellow, or no, sorry, a yellowish pink, and probably a tone of about 2 and saturation of 2 to 3. This is also a peach, more in the champagne color, but an orange dominant, yellow secondary. Again, close to the champagne color, orange dominant, yellow secondary. And if we look at the trajectory for this right now, starting in 2015, you're looking at $25 a carat, and I would say current 2019 was about 100. We'll just say it was about 200. Peach right now in this size range is running about 500 a carat. So substantial change in price, but I'm sorry, I was reading you volume. So that there was a substantial change in volume from 38 carats in 2017 to 168 carats in 2018 and 19, about 193. I'm going to say at this point, our volume is probably back at 2018 numbers, just because it's not moving very quickly, peach. Price-wise, 2015 at 350 per carat, and 2019 570. I would say right now 2021 for 2 to 4 carat sizes, you're looking at about 800 per carat, 8 to 850 And because of the fading issue, you know, we do have to, and primarily most of the top labs are able to do that test. You do have to add on, you know, the additional 150 for a certificate minimum in that size range. So my predictions, even though there are stability issues with the lab cert, the issue can be eliminated with a fade test. This color has lower long-term price volatility versus teal green. Use of numerical grading will be helpful since peach has a lower tone.
This story, what you told me, that scares me. That sounds like having a heated kunzite in a window and in a sun, and suddenly it's white.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening right now.
It is. It is the most scary thing I heard. I mean, I knew lots of treatments are going on, like a surface treatment, like a HPHT, like what's that, almost 10 years or 15 years ago when Thailand really flooded the market with just dropped that gorgeous pud, taking such a low quality stones from Sri Lanka and just, you know, using it to all kind of, you know, chemicals and really modifying the atoms of the stone. That was scary. And I'm glad it took all the global reputable labs long time to go after, and then they, you know, eventually released it. So this is totally scary, very scary.
And actually, because the laboratories are testing tolerance of the stone, the reason that it becomes scary is because the temperature testing the stone in the laboratory setting, and the temperature, if it's if the threshold of the temperature is too high, natural sapphires that are unheated with, let's say, a fracture, internal fracture, it can cause the stone to break in half.
Rupture, right? Rupture.
So
that is true.
Nowadays, the labs that are doing this testing method, they actually will ask for a approval to do it because of, and they'll call you and let you know, but they won't take the responsibility if you approve the test and it cracks. So those are all new factors that we have to consider. So, but it is an important factor because we don't want to pass off a stone to a customer potentially that where the stone would fade. You know, it's
I mean, it is just ethically wrong.
Right.
And as long as we disclose it, I mean, it shouldn't happen. Either we should not focus on any artificial treatment, or if we are going to do it correct and stability of the color, and you know, and bringing the beauty. And we all know it. What is the purpose of heating it? It is just to bring the beauty of the taking inexpensive stones and just making them looking pretty without modifying their atoms and without any, you know, artificial chemicals have been used and modify the identity of the stone. We all know that. But if we are going to go in that, this is just, it's very uncomfortable, very, very, you know.
I can imagine. I think especially for freestanding stores where they have to make a determination, or if you're in the state and you're taking in a piece, I mean, I highly recommend going the laboratory route. I try not to overlap with the laboratories as far as the work that I do, but I am quite happy that I do help provide them with reference samples, so that they can help improve the testing process. You know, so the sooner, you know, it might take a few years, but eventually they'll identify what's causing that, and hopefully notify everyone. There was a large influx in beryllium treatment, and there's every chance that there were beryllium treated stones. Disclosure, you know, especially in source countries, you have to know what the treatment is, and then kind of understand how beryllium works and how it impacts the stone, and then ask them, you know, what sort of treatment. sometimes the problem is when you're buying in source countries, the sales people don't know. They just, it's not like they're trying to deceive you, but they just don't know. But yeah, from your description and then putting that together with the time frame, I'm skeptical that it might have been a issue of beryllium.
And so the beryllium has various isotopes, so it's not, they use it while as a radioactive, or how do they use the beryllium?
Beryllium, basically, they use it, you know, it is a chemical, and so they basically heat it in a furnace. And so then we look at different heating methods, and then how the depth of the absorption of beryllium. So most of the beryllium that was being done back in the but in that time frame, let's say early 2000s, it even goes back a little bit before that. It's just surface beryllium, surface diffusion. So I don't know. I would say if you cut it open, it's going to be maybe having a white center.
Oh wow! So and that goes for the whole necklace, all the colors basically.
Possibly. I mean, the goal of, let's say you're looking at a necklace, the goal is to get all the colors to match nicely.
Yeah.
So it could be a mixture of fully natural and then a mixture of beryllium. But I'm making that assumption based on popularity at a specific time frame, and the fact that you are doing this in a source, like looking at them in a source country. So
I believe that the temperature, the beryllium, they actually modify the atom. They heat it in the furnace in such a high temperature, as high as, if I remember correctly, 1600 to 2000 degrees, something like that, where actually the stone melts, and then it's really, you know, melts and then re-solidify, but it's all in the surface. I mean, it just take a very, very poor quality stone and make them looking drop dead gorgeous. And this is how the pot was flooded at that time in, you know, Asia, in Hong Kong and all that. And suddenly it was as a, wow, how come the pot sapphire, first of all, the rarity, and then the market was flooded. But anyway, yeah, this is. So
the last area section that I'll speak on is Padvaraja. Color description, again, trade term, rising sun, setting sun, lotus flower. How does origin impact price? You know, and then again, we're using that 2080 description and site identification, especially in source countries. New sources of Padvaraja, again, going back to this color stability. I think we hammered down on that one before it gets more complex, which I would say would require a few more hours. Traditionalists believe Padvaraja can only be from Sri Lanka, and they're willing to pay a premium for that. So moving on, description, rising and setting sun, lotus flower. So this is what would be considered a setting sun, kind of pinkish. And also these fall into two separate markets. So the orangish dominant, pinkish secondary is popular in the United States and Western countries. The pinkish dominant, orange secondary is more popular in the East, meaning Asia. Origin impact, definitely. The traditionalists only ask for Sri Lanka or for the Sri Lankan Padvaraja. As some of you know, the trade term for it is the king sapphire. It is absolutely beautiful. And I should have thought about it, but I didn't put that slide in. But if you hold a lotus flower next to a fine Padvaraja, they look exactly the same. And it's essentially that separation of color, but also a nice blend. So you can see the distinctive, let's say, zoning between orange and pink, which makes it absolutely beautiful. Again, we're looking at, for a Padvaraja, I would say the hue in that orangish pink to pinkish orange range, and a tone of saturation of over 4 for each, 4 or 5. If I would typically, if it falls under that, and there's no strong color zoning that shows pink and orange, it's not going to get a pod barrage disturb. Going over this guy, just from looking at this one, it's 100% or Madagascar based on the inclusions. So if you can see the little crystal bubbles, if there are, I would say, an explicit number of them, and I'm sure under 10x magnification, we can see substantially more than we see in this picture. You'd be able to identify it definitely as Madagascar. Again, pink dominant and an orangish secondary. And that will end my presentation.
That note, thank you so much. It was wonderful.